We ready to go? Jump right in. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming back, especially those of you that took the time to come out and meet with us over the course of this week, or those of you that were accosted on the street by Tasha as you were, going through your building. So we had a really, really good week, and I'm excited to show you some of the stuff that we are coming up with and kind of suggesting today. As I said all along during this week, we're also recording this so that we can share it with other folks that can't make it to the meeting today. But I always like to start with just a little bit of a recap of the things that we heard and some of the challenges that we heard. I think one of the biggest things as we undertake the task of branding recommendations for this Main Street district that Dundalk has is the fact that it didn't necessarily have a clear identity. Whenever you have a place, but the name is kind of all over the place, it sometimes is hard to consistently communicate because different people call it different things. The thing that we heard loud and clear is there were a couple identities that were used most often. Old Dundalk was used a lot, and the shopping center was used a lot. Now, each of those has some challenges to it as well. So we have Old Dundalk, which is also a neighborhood. And we've got the Old Dundalk Neighborhood Association, so not necessarily identity that we could completely control. And the shopping center, or the Dundalk Village Shopping Center, although that is a name that's known, it doesn't adequately represent the entire collection of properties in the district. So we had those two challenges, and then we also had the realization that we didn't want to create some sort of crazy non-existent name and try to be cute. So we tried to be very, very realistic with the recommendations, and I think you'll kind of see as we go through. I think that what you're going to see is a toolbox that just makes a lot of sense. It's not, it's like, okay, I can understand how this kind of stuff would be used. As we said on Tuesday, one of the things I was very, very excited about was that although you had gone through a branding process in 2014, you had created a community-wide brand. Several years before that, you had gone through a branding process with the organization, and might not have been when somebody went out to have a baby and came back with a new logo. I think one of the things that we know, though, is it was great that as the community and the organization were doing their job and going through and launching these initiatives, they weren't really blurring the lines. They did a really good job of making sure that there was this understood distinction between destination identity and the organization identity. So as we sit today, we have this organizational logo, and then we have this brand that really has emerged as a residential recruitment brand. And the way that we're kind of referring to the Live the Unexpected system is the community-wide identity. I think to summarize, here are going to be the overarching recommendations. I think that there's an opportunity to consider. Hop on over here. Yeah.
She's leaving in a minute.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Well, you can sneak out. From an organizational standpoint, there is the opportunity to update that look and feel. You're completely and totally, that's always on the table. It makes a lot of sense as we're going to be introducing a new tool in the identity toolbox that is going to really reinforce that community-wide brand that was created 4 years ago. It makes sense for the organization to consider options to make sure that everybody's singing the same song and that, it's keeping up to date. There's also the realization that that you have a high level of awareness of the organization. Many, many times when we do surveys and we ask about downtown or Main Street organizations, people might or might not have heard about it. They might or might not know what in the world's going on. You all had an 85% awareness rating out of the survey of over 300 people. So that's actually really good. People tend to know you. They also know DRC. So as we're looking at that, one of the things that we'll be talking about is kind of the evolution or just kind of the adoption of the acronym. You know, I'm not a fan of creating an acronym when an acronym doesn't exist already. But if that's been the natural progression, then that can be beneficial to you. From there, I always like to talk a little bit about the branding toolbox. This is the four main components that are essential to be able to have consistent communication. And they're pretty common sense, but the first is truly identifying and adopting a color palette. The second is the use of uniform typefaces. The third, having a consistent approach to messaging. Now, that doesn't mean saying the exact same thing all the time. It means having the appropriate thing to say at the appropriate time to the appropriate audience. So many times consistent messaging is actually the awareness of all the different initiatives and target markets and the appropriate language for each of those. And then finally, some sort of consistency in the approach to graphics. Now, from there, one of the things that we like to do is we like to listen through those input sessions and try to kind of cull this down into a set of brand values. And again, we're blurring the lines a little, and I want to be very, very blunt about that. We are looking at this commercial district, and some of the things that we heard, some of the comments that we heard, don't necessarily and directly relate to the district, but we had to acknowledge that the commercial district is a geography, but it also serves a larger role in the community. The commercial district historically was, and in the future stands to be, the glue that truly turns those 24 neighborhoods into a single community. So we took some of those assets that are kind of more neighborhood-based assets and really kind of adopted them as the personality of place. But one of the big things we looked at was the intentionality of the design. When you dig into the history of the design of this core, it truly is stunning. When you look at things like the Garden City movement, and then you also understand that Dundalk truly was one of the first places in the country that quality of life was held as an attribute that all citizens deserve, and there was an intentionality in designing a community that would truly be mixed income and mixed race. So it, from its inception, had a focus on diversity and quality of life for all. It's kind of a cool concept. It's you know, you truly were at the very front end of some pretty cool stuff. You're a hardworking community. We heard that overlooked, you know, either overlooked or we're sick and tired of the misconceptions, having to deal with misconceptions of 3 decades ago. You know, when you hear a single radio DJ pointed out as, you know, they set the tone for everything we're fighting. You know, those are the things that are all part of this. Misunderstood as to what we are, what we have to offer, and also that opportunity that we afford. So some of those terms might seem a little bit negative, but they're not. They're actually doors. They're doors for us to be able to introduce people to the community. The biggest thing that we do have to understand, though, is there's probably not going to be a very high level of motivation for people outside the community to explore. So we have to use intrigue. We have to show them things that they don't expect to see. And I think that goes back to a lot of the concepts we saw with Live the Unexpected. But I think that we just had a little bit of an issue with tone in Live the Unexpected. That's not a message that we can truly make expandable to every single facet. So although it might make a lot of sense for residential recruitment, we need some other messaging to do those other things. So then from there, we look at color palette. The pre-existing brand had 3 defined colors: a blue, kind of a turquoise, and then I don't even know exactly the best way to describe it. It's almost well, yeah, and it's even brighter than that. It's pretty bright. One of the things that I noticed was obviously with those three colors, we depart altogether from the school green, which we also see in the Dundalk flag. There's some pros and cons to that, but one of the things that we do know is that Dundalk green is where some of your inherent local pride exists. So although I didn't bring it back completely, I did bring an additional slightly greener green, just to kind of say, because I'm trying to kind of build this palette out. I also introduced a slightly lighter blue, and then a couple more neutral, kind of a charcoal gray and a lighter gray. So, as it starts to build out, it just gives us more colors to work with. Again, preserving that kind of three-color palette for that top-level community-wide, but then being a little bit more broad brush as we dig into the district itself. Yeah, I think that they fit really nicely together, and what's kind of cool about it is although it's a lot of colors, you've got 7 colors now, when you start to look at color sequences, you can completely change the tone of everything if you cluster these 3 versus these 3. So it gives you consistency while still dramatically opening up the doors. One of the biggest things that hinders brand implementation is too few colors in the palette. And when you have too few, you end up feeling like every single thing that you create looks exactly alike. And as the content creator, you get bored with it. So you have to kind of walk that line. But then the other side of that is we developed a brand for downtown Laramie, Wyoming. And in the course of doing that, they told us, they were like, no matter what you do, please do not use the brown and gold from University of Wyoming. But what we did was we looked at the University of Wyoming branding system. They had 2 primary colors, and then they had an identified color palette for secondary colors. Their secondary color palette had 23 different colors. Way too many colors to ever, like with 23 colors, you never achieve consistency, because essentially it's like use whatever you want. So I think that this gives us that nice balance, and while still keeping things in a pretty small spectrum. Now, in addition to that, I'm a big believer in the connective power of typeface. So you all had identified 2 typefaces in that branding system. The primary is Warnock, and then the secondary is Frutiger. We're sticking with that, okay? Your word type and that main Dundalk identity is in Warnock. Warnock is it's a serif typeface, which I learned in school that means that it has doohickeys. That's the technical term, doohickeys. But whenever you have a serif typeface, it's going to feel a little bit more traditional. It's going to feel a little bit more grounded. But it's still somewhat... It's a little bit neutral. It's got some kind of strange ways that it does some of the letters. So it gives you the opportunity to feel kind of custom and unique. There's some sharpness to it that I really like, that I feel like kind of plays into a little bit of that industrial past. And then that secondary typeface, Frutiger, is a sans serif typeface. I focused all of my uses in 2 weights, bold and black. I wanted things that had some heft to it. One of the great things about sans serif typefaces is they're intended to be content neutral. One of the biggest mistakes that districts and communities make is they say, we're historic, so we have to use papyrus. And it's like, believe it or not, you don't have to have that much personality infused in your typeface. There's a reason why American Apparel, Bloomingdale's, Jeep, Walgreens, all these different companies use Helvetica as their typeface. And they use content neutrality, and then they infuse the personality into it. So I felt like it was a really, really good mix, and it creates a good, well-balanced platform for you to draw from. Now, I think you will see, as I get to event extension, that's the place where you can bring in 3rd accent typefaces. Okay? So you'll be able to see how that whole system kind of builds out. The word type, like we showed, this was already created. We simply pulled this out. I think that this is a really solid place to start from. There's literally no reason to start from scratch when you have something you've created, something that you paid for, and something that you've implemented. So it's showing up online. It's starting to show up in wayfinding signage. So it doesn't make sense to abandon it. It's fine. You can tell that, again, there's been some thought put into it. It has been spaced in a way that is custom. Many times when you have an A and an L that are next to each other, it creates an odd space because the way they move apart from one another. So that was thoughtfully pulled together. You see the U and the N touch. So all of this was done by a designer who paid attention to making sure that something worked for your letters and your name. And that consistency is something that'll be good for you. So we've looked at colors, looked at typeface, and then the next thing that we really focus in on is the message. And what we tried to do is we tried to take all the things that we heard from you all over Tuesday, all the things that we saw and learned, and put it into a narrative that we call a brand statement. So I'm going to read that for you. We're historic Dundalk. Designed and influenced by the Garden City movement, Dundalk began as a model city with tree-lined streets emanating from the historic town square with its Tudor-style shopping district and grand public parks. The innovative plan of our town served to provide a pleasant lifestyle to the workers of nearby Bethlehem Steel, who forged the steel of ships that protected our country in World War I. What was once rural farmland in Baltimore County quickly became a bustling community that combined town and country in an idyllic setting. The connectivity of our design is still evident in the character of our community today, where children line the sidewalks on their way to school, our neighbors gather to celebrate in Heritage Park, and residents shop in the small businesses in our historic town center. It is in the century since our birth, our community has grown to over 60,000 residents as neighborhoods like St. Helena, Dunlogan, and Turner Station emerged, each served by our historic Dundalk Commercial District. There is an active energy and movement here in Dundalk, on display by neighbors greeting each other from their front porches, children playing in our parks, and families getting outside to stroll the sidewalks of the ship streets. In historic Dundalk, the Dundalk Renaissance Corporation is cultivating grassroots energy to sustain our businesses, grow economic opportunity, and protect our neighborhoods throughout the community. The DRC and its partners realize our challenges, but focus on opportunities that our community offers the budding small business or the new resident searching for an authentic place to live with an amazing quality of life. The values of the DRC are based on the tenets of neighborliness, heritage, sustainability, and innovation, as it creates opportunity through pop-up businesses, facade grants, and incubation of business. As a designated Maryland Main Street community, the DRC is the steward of historic Dundalk and is laying the foundation for the revitalization of the heart of our community. Our unique history, distinctive neighborhoods, and resilient business community that define the Dundalk character is most evident in the personality of our people. That spirit is truly unexpected to those who think they know us, but haven't taken the time to learn our stories. We are proud of our heritage and celebrate our diversity. We have a shared set of values that are founded in the working class nature of our early history. We are hardworking, scrappy, and determined. We are self-reliant, and we fight for the things we cherish, whether it be our elementary school or our historic downtown. We have a passion and pride for our community that is ingrained in our longtime residents, as well as our new neighbors who are drawn to the opportunity and momentum of our community. We are authentic and we are intentional. We are close-knit and we are interconnected. We have a long and colorful history, and we are a work in progress. We are Dundalk, and we invite you to the place we call home. Historic Dundalk, designed to be different. So what that does is it starts to pull all those elements together that we heard folks say, and it takes in that historic core and the historic origin of this place and this downtown that truly, when you get on the ground, it feels different. I mean, I said it several times over the course of the week. if this is a shopping center, it's the coolest looking shopping center I've ever seen. You know, it's an interesting play of the understated. And I think that that's one of the things where people have had so many negative things to say, and you've kind of lived under this cloud that you're scared to death to be overly positive and or to share too much, because like we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. You know, we don't want to fail on that promise. But I really felt like what you all needed from a district standpoint was something that was you could trust it. It looked reliable and intentional. And you know, I tend to stray away from architectural elements and logos, honestly. That's kind of a style that I have built over the past 15 years. But in your particular circumstance and with this district, the buildings and their relationship to one another are so compelling. And I felt like there was an unbelievable importance for us to be able to push to the forefront this concept that if you haven't seen historic Dundalk, you haven't seen the community. If you haven't seen buildings that look like this, you haven't seen everything that we are. And that's a very, very important message, because you are a big community. You do have 14 neighborhoods that make you up. So, and then that idea of design to be different, I think you'll see how that kind of comes together as we look through the destination brand, the organizational brand. This gives us that opportunity to have several different components, several different builds of that logo. You can have a stacked version, a horizontal version. You can have one that acknowledges that relationship to Maryland Main Street community. I think one of the things that has been, it's always confusing whenever you're connected with Main Street, because Main Street to consumers is an address, where Main Street organizationally is a nationwide movement and a proven track record and a reliability and trust. So, you know, we had to kind of go through, and in our minds, you know, DRC delivers the Main Street model, and historic Dundalk is a Main Street community. Does that make sense? And then in doing that, I just wanted to create the idea that you could also have a simplified version as well that maybe just uses the lamppost or just even uses some of the architectural elements out of the gable. You know, that's something that, again, that's not new. I mean, for multiple decades, this community has understood that that look was unique. So you can find signage that features it and things like that. That needs to be a part of your graphic that you can kind of run with. But that lays the foundation of kind of a graphic package that can be available to the business community. But then I wanted to look at the organizational identity. And with DRC, I wanted to just throw something out there that could be a little bit more contemporary. There was a big challenge that we kept talking about, was this idea of these 24 neighborhoods coming together to create one place. And I really liked that. So I in my mind, what I was looking for is, how can I create a simple icon that connects 24 neighborhoods into Dundalk and exudes the idea that this organization's moving Dundalk forward. So again, this is kind of first swipe at it, but what I created was something that looks kind of like this. And it's actually got 24 segments. They're arranged into a circle, self-contained, nice clean D moving forward. You know, if we're talking about it is a place that is designed to be different, then the organization is the one that is defining that difference. And you are the ones, through your programs and your efforts and your activities, that are helping to truly drive the difference. Now, I didn't want to come out and land on decisions from a branding standpoint that really need to be decisions that are organizational in nature. But one of the things that I think that this does from a design standpoint, and I want to share with you all, because I always think that good design opens up opportunities, not shackles you into particular pathways. So the first thing that I'm showing is simply changing the logo with the current name as it is. as you continue to roll this out, being able to adopt the acronym makes a lot of sense. But you'll notice that in the icon itself, I made a deliberate decision to only include D instead of trying to figure out a way to put DRC into the icon. That was a very intentional decision. The thing that's nice about this is at the end of the day, you will always be serving Dundalk. So the D's not going to change. So why in the world would you want to kind of paint yourself into a design corner if you have a conversation and say, you know what, we've been renaissancing for 15 years. So maybe we're something different now. You know, maybe we need to be more deliberate in showing people that we're keeping up with the times, or, you know, oftentimes put in a slightly different way. It's like, what have we achieved and what's our new set of visions and how do we convey to people? So again, I think that one of the biggest things that you guys need to know is you have a higher than normal awareness, which you should be proud of. You have a higher than normal positive connotation from the people that we talk to, which is great, because typically we come across people that always, even if they love Main Street, they've got a list of their complaints. And
I hope my board is going to hear this.
well, you know, the thing that was awesome is, I mean, literally, we started off on Tuesday morning with business meeting, and we had business owners who literally walked into the office, and the first thing out of your mouth was, I love DRC. I love these guys. And, you know, that is something that you want to be real mindful of. Are you abandoning positive brand equity through a name change? Or sometimes can simply adopting an acronym and really becoming DRC, maybe that eases some of the pain that having a name like Renaissance Corporation, you know, that it's kind of fumbles around. But once we look at these components, we can now look at them in this whole system and understand that we haven't done anything that was redundant. We now have components that give us the tools that we need. So that original brand from 2014 really is that residential recruitment and that community-wide brand. I love the simplicity of it. I love the fact that it, in a very, very subtle way, kind of ties into that 43 miles of water. And, you know, I think it's the right thing to use community-wide. But then you now have this core commercial district that's focused in on a couple things, focused in on marketing to the retail customer, focusing in on recruiting the entrepreneur, and also in reintroducing the market to the local customer. There's a little subtle nuance there. This is not a local pride campaign. This is the fact that many times locals remove commercial districts from their consideration set. They drive past them every day. They're convinced nothing's there. There's no motivation to explore them. So that historic Dundalk really is a way to open up the, hey, I need to go and see what's down there. If you haven't seen it lately, you haven't seen it. And then DRC is both the organizational, they're the ones doing programs and incentives and grants and making things happen. But I did something a little different here. I also think that in the DRC brand identity, that is where the community pride emerges. There is a absolutely essential relationship between the organization and the residents. And if DRC can emerge as the one reminding them why this place that they live is so special, then you're going to create a passionate connection between that organization and the community. So typically, I would have put that into the community-wide, but here I feel like strategically it needs to be nested directly under you guys. I think that you need that support because there is no municipal level handling things that typically get handled in a community like this. So I hope that makes sense. Now, something that we didn't talk about at all week, but I always like to play with is when I hear enough people talking about the school, always like to look at things like that school pride, and just introduce the idea that there can be simple ways that the school might also be able to incorporate that word type into some of their identity. So you start to bring some congruence in there while still knowing that the green and gold is going to be the school. So if the football team's horrible or, something bad happens that makes everybody mad, you're a little bit shielded, but there is that conjunction. It's important. It really is. Now, one of the other things that we talked about is we talked a lot about you could sit around this table and you could come up with all kinds of giant, expensive ideas. That's easy to do. How do we do small things that make a big difference, the low-hanging fruit of sorts? And one of the big things that we've been promoting all across the country is the idea of what we call vibrancy grants. So for years, people were doing facade grants. The theory and concept was we're going to give incentives to people to fix up their facades. Their facade is going to look so good that all the building owners around them are going to say, oh, I'm embarrassed. I need to invest all my money in fixing my facade too. And what ended up really happening is the facade grants have been great, but they've also created kind of it's like a hurry up and start where, yeah, maybe I'm aware of it, but now I'm going to sit around and wait until the next round of facade grants. So one of the things that we've started to see is facade grants break down into component grants. So maybe you focus in on a year of let's enhance our signage. And this way, every building owner or business owner can simply say, how's my signage? Is my signage good? Does my signage need improvement? This is a small investment. We can make a big difference. And then we can single source all those projects with a single sign vendor and make our money go a lot farther that year. And then the next year, it's awnings. How are our awnings? And we tackle it component by component. We'll take that same concept and take it over into anything that adds color or life. We want as you drive through historic Dundalk, we want it to feel alive. So whether it's bistro chairs, whether it's putting colored, we heard a lot of talk about benches, We had benches, we removed benches, you remove benches, people can't sleep in the benches, but then nobody can sit, blah, blah, blah. So, being very mindful there, but being able to do things
Not proud of that.
Right,
Okay?
I get it. I get it. It is. It really is. And it's universal, but I think one of the things that we've started to realize is communities have started to realize that we can do a lot of things to try to avoid particular problems, but what are we stripping away when we try to avoid those problems? And are there more creative solutions? And are there certain things that we're okay happening? We did in Shelby, North Carolina, we suggested investing in these bistro type chairs all on their square. And people were like, well, they're going to move them. Yeah, exactly. They are going to move them. Well, what if they take them? Where are they going to take them? They take them home? Okay, so they take them home. Guess what? They might be gone, and then they might come back. It's okay. And it's just kind of funny. But I always like to show this one. This is a little photo from Michigan. And the reason I like to show this is because this is a super, super narrow sidewalk. And everybody always said you can't do anything on that sidewalk. And they figured out a way to do outdoor dining on a sidewalk that's pretty doggone narrow. So being able to take advantage and just don't fold to the we can'ts. Come up with a creative Dundalk solution to what you can do here. Keeping your mind open about art, about color. One of the big things we've seen lately is murals have been moving to the sidewalks instead of just on walls. You all have done some amazing murals in this district. Absolutely stunning. Maybe one of the things that you could do is you could look towards what they call them horizontal murals, which I think is kind of silly. But, maybe you can think about looking at things that beautify on the ground that way.
The county won't let us do those.
Listen, Adam.
Maybe we should just do it and see if anybody notices. But
we
have asked.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's we were working in.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We were.
The state said just do it.
Right.
I'm on board with the ask for forgiveness.
Absolutely. Well, so it's great. We were working in Waitsfield, Vermont, and we had a public meeting, and we were asking people what they'd like to see, and the entire crowd went nuts about wanting a crosswalk. And it immediately, we want a crosswalk, we need a crosswalk, there's so many people that walk across, and then it immediately got squashed by VDOT said no. VDOT said we can't have a crosswalk there. And in the middle of the night, that night, one of the councilmen who was in the meeting went out there and spray painted the crosswalk. And of course, we woke up the next morning and we were kind of all like, oh no, what monster have we created? The best thing was 3 weeks later, we get a photo from the council member. VDOT had passed by the sidewalk, couldn't believe how badly it had deteriorated, and repainted it. They had no clue where it should or shouldn't be. So, being able to have a little bit of guerrilla flavor, I think is fine. It's absolutely good. Thinking about things that allow people to interact, whether it's public art. This is a great little installation in Columbia, South Carolina, where they took propane tanks and welded them together. And people love water, and they love things they can beat on. So, anything that makes noise, making sure that you can have the opportunity for life and vibrancy and street performers and that kind of thing. And I'm just kind of calling that whole initiative Vibrant Dundalk. And it's just the small, cheap, easy to do things that make visual signs of life. So as people drive through, they quit fixating on vacant buildings and they start fixating on the things that they see going on. And to be completely blunt, you have a lot of street activity already. And some of the street activity is going to automatically confirm negatives that people might have heard. So you have to combat that to be able to cultivate a vibrant retail market. And this is a good, easy way to do that. Now, from there, I always like to dig into brand extension. Brand extension is where we look at all of our color palettes and our typefaces to start to tie them in to the events that you put on. So you could take things like Maker's Market, and you can see, create a logo for that, always bringing in Historic Dundalk, so you're making that association between the event and the destination. The Dundalk Housing Fair, so again, using the colors, but now you're truly making kind of a consistent logo so that you've got that graphic consistency with that word type. Future use on this building, we talked about co-working space and talked a little bit about what that could be and what it could be called. Internally, the organization had talked about something called Launch Point, which ties in with Trade Point. We thought that from a strategic standpoint, that made a lot of sense. So I went ahead and I created a logo for that. But then I also decided to throw out a completely different name just for conversation's sake. If we wanted to do something that connected a little bit more into some of this industrious history, just calling it something like Forge, something that ties in to that kind of acknowledged identity of the community. So giving you some things to think about from that standpoint, different ways that you could kind of picture that. Again, once you have the platform, the ability to wrap in programs like your pop-ups, it becomes easy. Like before, every time you do something, you're like, okay, we got to design a logo. And then, 6 weeks later, we're like, okay, we really probably need to pull the trigger and decide what we're going to do. Where here, you have enough components that are predefined that it makes this stuff easy. Holiday hoopla. Again, tying off of the same typefaces, tying off of those different elements. And then an element of Holiday Hoopla that I thought was so cool it deserved its own logo, the cookie tour. So again, everything is not exactly alike. Everything is not forced to only use those two typefaces. Everything is not forced to only use the colors in the palette. But by having those as the connective tissue, you start to stitch together all the things that you do. And then it also rolls over into collateral. I was really pleased when we went into your store on Tuesday to see shirts from the Historical Society that said Dundalk. Like you could actually buy product that had the community's identity on it. That was good. I'm a big believer in having things that people want to wear, So typically in communities, we're really good at creating what I call car wash t-shirts. You know, it's the shirt that has 600 logos on the back and that they're so ugly you only wear them to paint or cut the grass in. And being able to have like, yeah, it's sleep shirt, exactly. You know, right, you want to have something that people actually want to wear. And I think that's something that goes a long way. Another idea that popped up as we were walking around, I noticed these old movie marquees over at the Family Dollar, the most theatrical Family Dollar in America, right? This, it, in it, right? It's all how you package it. It's all how you package it. So, you know, with that,
It could be America's first theatrical family.
it could be. It could be.
It comes with ashtrays.
Being able to go through this could be low-hanging fruit for us. You know, this could be the kind of thing where the property owner would not mind if DRC fixed up the doors a little bit and then became the manager of what goes in there. So, you know, this is just kind of showing, putting some graphics in there, being able to use it to promote events. And it's just a little influx of pretty, you know, it's just a little bit of place where you can kind of control and make it a little bit better. Same thing, this next one's a little funny because it's like a street banner exactly where the angle is. So it's kind of like this is the time warp location where you feel like you're going into a thing.
That needs a banner.
It does. I need to add a banner onto the logo so that it just keeps going. But you know, one of the things that you've got some banner hardware, some of the banner hardware has broken or that kind of thing. I want to talk to you a little bit about banners real quick. Most people think that banners are for visual appeal, and they're pretty, so that's why we put them up. Banners can do a lot of different things for us. They can notify us of destinations that we might not know about. They can slow down traffic, especially in places where people and pedestrians coexist. From your standpoint, you have some interesting dynamics because you have a couple different things that you need to accomplish in the same place. There are times where you want to use banners to maybe minimize impact of buildings that aren't maintained as well as they should. Maybe you want to use banners to create a very consistent rhythm so your attention is pulled away from vacant storefronts into the rhythm of what you're seeing along the street banners. Sometimes I would say along Dundalk Ave, you want to denote that you're driving through somewhere special. So your banners need to make an impact like you've passed something that you should have seen. So, you know, you've got these kind of different elements where, you know, right along Center Place, you might have banners that want to draw your eye down into the park. So you create this sense of a pedestrian connection from park to park. So this is not about having one and only one design. Again, this is a little bit more ornate than I typically design on things. There are two main ways that banners are produced: 4-color printing on vinyl versus 1 or 2 color printing screen printed onto canvas. And as I move towards a final package, I'm going to be recommending designs of both. So there'll be some places where you want a slightly more complex and intricate design, and then other places where you want the rhythm and repetition of that kind of solid single color. So I'll be able to share both of those with you. I just didn't have time. And then from there, I also created a template for advertising where some of our businesses could go through and we could highlight those businesses, but also the formatting is set up in such a way where if the businesses is marketing themselves, they can integrate their logo and they can proudly proclaim where they're located. So it gives us an opportunity to have a dominant photo that highlights some of the stuff. I'll tell you, when you look at inventory pieces per square foot, you guys have literally nailed it. Like, I'm not sure that there is a business that can beat what you've got going on in the most pink closet I've ever walked in. Like, it is amazing. And I showed the picture to my daughter, my 4-year-old, and She very much wants a poop emoji bow real bad. So, but you know, being able to go through, being able to highlight inventory and product is so very important. You know, being able to go in and show off some of the business type that, you know, I think a lot of people would see this, and what we almost want people to think in their mind is, where's that from? Or it's actually okay if they say, I can't believe they're using stock photography. There's not a store that sells that in Dundalk. But there is. And it's when you hit somebody with the concept that something they thought they knew, they don't actually know, that's the emotion that we need to have them come back down and rediscover the district. I always like to highlight some of the amenities that go on. I feel like that the Y and the Y building is some good stuff going on there. Some of the history there, the elements that Aaron did a great job doing photography throughout the district this morning. You know, we put this angle of the Heritage Park so that we didn't feature the orange cone on the gateway. You know, it's one of those things where sometimes you got to come back a couple times to get the shot you want, and that's all good. Again, I love the gazebo in this particular park far more than that particular park. But you know, trying to be mindful of things. The gazebo is what is used and featured as the logo of the old Dundalk Neighborhood Association. So knowing that architectural element has already been used to represent this neighborhood association, we didn't want to incorporate it from a graphic standpoint into any of the logo work that we were doing. Even though we have that external community-wide campaign, we feel like it's always important to be able to highlight that quality housing stock. I think that being able to show off some of these houses, you've got some beautiful homes, and I don't think the naysayers realize that, so you can kind of hit them in the face with that message and that image. Again, we talked about the murals. Being able to kind of highlight some of that stuff, I think, is all very, very important. Now, we've talked about a lot of tools, but still, at the end of the day, if all of this sits squarely on the shoulders of DRC, you can only do so much. So one of the other things that we created is a brand partner sheet. So what this does is this literally, in conjunction with making the graphic resources available to the business community, is simply a one-page sheet that gives ideas of how they might use it, how they might be able to integrate it, how they might be able to benefit from it, whether they're making merchandise or, you know, one of the things that I'm thinking is, you know, is there a way that we could go through and design and create some sort of either custom, it'd probably be easier to do a custom medallion for the center of the bow, and then yeah, you know, I mean, doing cool stuff like that. We've had, in numerous occasions, we've gone through and we've had communities that have figured out some way to turn something into custom jewelry. And, you know, so cool stuff, just ways that different people can benefit from it. But I mean, you know, even going into your store and seeing that you're selling the shirts for the Historical Society, you know, there's that connection, and how can you profit from it? And then something else that is a little new for us, but we're actually really excited about, having done this for as long as we have, what I've done is I've created something called Brand Score. And the brand score will give you as an organization the opportunity, say in 12 months, to just take a break, step back, and evaluate where you're at from implementation. I think a lot of times people, they always say, are you going to give us an implementation plan? And honestly, that doesn't really exist. It's called a budget, you know? And it's like, I can't budget for you. You're the ones that, you know what you do, you know what you don't do, you know when you're ready to change business cards. You know what? If you just ordered brand new business cards for everybody last month, you're not going to throw them away and get rid of them. You're going to use them till they're gone, because we don't have money to waste. And that's completely fine. There's so much that needs to be done. There is no right way to do it. But there is a desired outcome of being able to get enough components out there to create that consistency. So this literally, it's just a score sheet, and it allows you to go through and kind of evaluate your own implementation. and then see where you're missing out on points. And then from that, decide what the easiest way for you to earn some additional points. And we found that it's just a really, really good tool to help people in that implementation. Certain things that maybe they never would have thought about. Like, for example, right now, does DRC have a branded PowerPoint template? So if you go out and make presentations that you've got this consistent DRC branding. That's a pretty easy thing to do, but a lot of times we just don't even think about it. Because when we have to sit down and do a presentation, it's like we know what we need to convey. So we're more focused on the content than we are on that pretty. But if you have that template, then you can always go back to that same thing. So I feel like I'm pretty excited about how it's coming together and the common sense of where we're leaning. It's not groundbreaking, but I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I mean, that kind of fits. But before we can move forward, we need to hear from you all. I mean, this is what we've been able to put together since yesterday. So there's still stuff on our list, obviously, that I didn't get to. Aaron made a nice list of deliverables that I got maybe 60% through. So there's some more stuff I want to do. I already started working on things. I'm about halfway done with the Family Fall Festival logo, pocket folder. We talked about that, organizational pocket folder, and some of that kind of stuff. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and your kind of gut reaction as you see the presentation and see the recommendations.
I like it. Yeah.
Cool.
Others?
Love the logo.
It's definitely fresh.
That is
Cool.
fresh. But yeah, it's historic and it's fresh at the same time.
Good, good.
I'm a resident.
Yeah.
Because I was 6 weeks old. And I have two things.
Okay.
In the beginning part where you have the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end where you said this ship,
Right.
there are also Dunn streets.
Oh, okay.
There are a whole lot of Dunn streets.
Right.
I live on one Dunn Lear. But there's
Gotcha.
Dunn Way, there's Dunn Globe, there's Dunn Ranch.
Right. Do people refer to it as the Dunn Streets?
Dunn Lear is in a historic Dunn.
Not as prevalent. I don't hear Dunn streets as prevalently as I hear Ship streets.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah, makes
there
sense.
are a
Okay,
bunch
great
of-
point.
there are a
Great
bunch
point.
of Dunns.
Yeah, yeah.
And that Dunn is part of Dunn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the other little thing on the D with the arrow.
Mm-hmm.
I conscious of if the parts were brought a little closer, then the part of the arrow coming this way was a little thinner with the same amount
Gotcha.
of arrow.
Gotcha. I know what you're saying. Well, I can look at several different options on that. You see what I'm going for?
Yes,
And, yeah.
moving forward,
Right, right.
D, but
Yeah.
to me, I don't know about
Okay. Great.
So it's funny because at one point we had a sort of volunteer corps that we had named Team Dundalk.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we don't fully control that identity because somebody else started like a Facebook group called Team Dundalk. So,
Gotcha.
but the logo that was used for that was a big D with a little T inside it.
Okay.
And so anyway, I feel like the arrow inside the D
Yeah.
kind of picks up on that a little bit in
Yeah.
a different way. But
Gotcha. Yeah, and you'll see that a lot. D is one of those great letters that because it's got so much meat to it, you can do that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, there are quite a few ways that we can play with it. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts?
To work with. It's recognizable, which is nice. It's yeah.
Good. Good.
I love the colors, like the seating and stuff. I just
Yeah.
absolutely love that. Hopefully they don't go walking. And,
Right.
I totally would put stuff
I wanted to put a bench, a bench not looking in.
Yeah, yeah.
But I wanted to put one like kind of out there.
Yeah.
And then I was afraid, like, so I was like, maybe not.
What?
So I just think that's really awesome.
It's so funny. I mean, I've walked by your store at least 6 times over this week, and I mean, y'all are always just packed in there tying bows, and I mean, maybe you ought to just see if people want to just charge to sit on a bench and watch you tie bows. Maybe it's a revenue stream that's unexplored, right?
And I'm gonna sit out there in a lawn chair and make bows.
You're right. Absolutely, absolutely.
One thing to think about, I don't know what the thinking would be with Baltimore County. I'm remembering just some Minnesota experiences. That you can only, if you get to put anything on the sidewalk, you can only control a certain number of feet out from the building. Now everything you showed us was very narrow, and then it's almost like, well, let's try it and see if anybody touches it.
Yeah, I mean, typically,
But that's just, like,
you're in a weird spot because typically the places where your ordinances on what you can do on your sidewalk, they're going to come in that local municipality. So it's going to be a city ordinance that's going to keep you from doing certain things with your signage, certain things with outdoor dining and that kind of stuff. So you would obviously you would have to explore that, and that might you open up a big can of worms because that might be interconnected with arts and entertainment district designation. I don't know exactly how that works in Maryland, whether there's any kind of, it doesn't change any kind of ordinances, does it?
It doesn't, and
Okay.
I mean, some of it I would say is, again, a little bit of like, if they're not looking, they're not looking. So I know.